friend of mine collects Napoleonic weapons. I can't say that it's ever really done anything for me, but I have learnt from time spent listening to him talk about auction pieces he's watching closely that a good story adds value. While I might have no interest in collecting swords or pistols, I do think the same is true of watches. And while an everyday consumer isn't going to be buying a famous unique piece on a budget, there are plenty of affordable timepieces out there with their own interesting history and stories to tell. That's going to be the focus of this video, recapping the stories related to the watches, rather than focusing on their design language, use case or specifications. Every piece that features is available for less than $1,000, and to spread the love as widely as possible, each brand has only featured once on the list. With all that said, let's get into the video. Back in 1981, Seiko Pogue was an engineer working for Casio. He was bumped into by a pedestrian one fateful day, and the wristwatch gifted to him by his father wrought free from his wrist and broke on impact with the ground. It was following this event that Seiko came up with the idea for the G-Shock, a watch that would offer 100 meters of water resistance, 10 years of battery life, and could survive an impact from a drop of 10 meters. I'd be devastated if I broke my father's watch, but Seiko was in a position to do something more substantial than just be upset. He set up a group within Casio known as Team Tough, who tested hundreds of prototypes to destruction, eventually bringing about the first G-Shock, the DW5000C in 1983. Casio recently released a modernized version of the original, but that is trading hands for silly money on the second-hand market, so I'd go with a DW5600, which has all the same styling without the unnecessary extra financial outlay. In the 1950s, the Tianjin watch factory was founded with the aim of producing domestic Chinese watches rather than relying on foreign imports. In 1961, the factory was commissioned by the Chinese Air Force to produce a chronograph piece for use by its pilots. Now, my grandfather served as a high-ranking official in the Chinese Air Force during World War II and for some time afterwards, so I've always wondered if he would have had anything to do with this request. The factory purchased the entire production line for the Venus 175 chronograph movement, tooling, technology, technical drawings, engineering, everything. They then modified the movement with more jewels, an increased beat rate and shockproofing to produce the ST19 column wheel chronograph, which still powers the Sea-Gull 1963 and many other affordable automatic chronographs to this day. The quartz crisis is perhaps the biggest story in watchmaking over the last 100 years. It was an event started by Seiko with the release of the world's first quartz watch, the Astron, on Christmas Day in 1969. While that was a premium timepiece, throughout the 70s the cost to produce quartz movements kept on dropping, till brands like Texas Instruments were pumping them out at such low prices that traditional watchmakers began to crumble. Many Swiss brands turned their eyes to the luxury market to survive, using the designs of Gerald Genta to change the perception of watchmaking in the eyes of the public. Other brands like Timex embraced the new technology, trying to avert crisis with an attitude of, if you can't beat them, join them. The Moonswatch is a story of hype above all else. It was lightning in a bottle, the fastest selling watch collaboration in history. Fueled by the prestige of the Speedmaster, queues formed around Swatch stores around the world as these models were only available to purchase in person. They quickly sold out, with scalpers selling the watches online immediately for enormous markups. The whole idea of scalping is one that's become a much more prevalent issue since the pandemic and lockdowns. These events created a surge in demand for prestige items, as well as creating economic hardship for people. This provided a huge incentive to buy and then flip products for a quick profit. If you try to get hold of a PlayStation 5 in the first year they launched, you'll understand exactly what happened with the Moonswatch. In the early 1960s, NASA put a range of chronograph watches through a series of punishing tests to find a watch that could withstand the rigors of their space program. The Omega Speedmaster was the only model to survive and became the official Moonwatch as a result. However, in 1971, astronaut David Scott got permission to bring a personal backup watch with him. When his Speedmaster failed, his backup, the Bulova Lunar Pilot, was worn instead, making it the first privately owned watch to be worn on the surface of the moon. Now, NASA are never going to go out of their way to acknowledge that, because of their partnership with Omega, but the fact is well known, and the watch itself very famous. Its most recent sale in 2015 of just over $1.6 million is testament to that. While there are plenty of stories to tell regarding the Seamaster, the one I want to share is a personal one. This is the watch that first got me into collecting. I had memories from my childhood of my dad always wearing his dad's watch, and the thought of trying to pass an Apple Watch that I was wearing at the time to my daughter seemed absolutely laughable. I wanted to invest in something that I thought might have some heirloom status, and this was it for me. I think my idea may actually have been counterproductive because now, as I want to protect it, it doesn't really see much wrist time. It's still a really important watch to me though, as it opened up a whole new hobby. But we'll get around to why I've included this piece in the video at the very end. For around this price point, you can pick up a vintage Pogue in okay condition, or one of the speed timer models in the yellow, red and blue colourway. The story for this piece continues the space theme from the Lunar Pilot, with Colonel William Pogue wearing his personal piece aboard Skylab Mission 4 in 1973. This gives the watch the distinction of being the first automatic chronograph in space, with Pogue double wristing it as a backup to his official Omega Speedmaster. A lesser known element to that story is that Commander Gerald P. Carr also bought a personal watch aboard, also an automatic chronograph in the Movado Datachron HS360, so it's a joint record really. Vintage models of the Movado are well north of $1,000 but the modern iteration comes in just under if you prefer that style. When Stanley Kubrick was working on his masterpiece, 2001: A Space Odyssey, he wanted his astronauts to have a suitably futuristic timepiece to match the aesthetic of the film. When he approached Hamilton with the request, they obliged with some prop watches that would later be developed into the X-01 Odyssey. However, the idea of their display, making use of digits, alongside the popularity of the film, made it clear to Hamilton that there was a demand for futuristic timepieces in the real world. This led to the release of the sci-fi inspired Pulsar in 1972, the world's first digital LED watch. While Hamilton sold the rights to the brand name to Seiko, they have since released the PSR, a reimagined and modernised version of the original model. The year is 1960. In Nepal, Dhaulagiri stands alone as the last mountain peak beyond 8,000 feet that had not yet been climbed. A year prior, in 1959, Certina had just released the first of its double security range, with their focus on shock and water resistance. It was chosen by the Swiss expedition that made the first successful ascent of Dhaulagiri the following May. cementing the range as serious tool watches with some genuine mountaineering pedigree. It's no small feat either, as while several hundred feet lower than Everest, Dhaulagiri is arguably harder to climb. It's more technically challenging and has a historical death rate of 15% compared to Everest's 2%. During much of World War II, soldiers were taking their own timepieces into battle. In 1943, Commander Alan Brooks sought to equip the British Armed Forces with a standard issue timepiece. The Ministry of Defence set out criteria which watchmakers would have to meet in order for their watches to be used. Officers were sent to Switzerland to find companies willing to fulfil the order, and technically 11 were found, with the 12th being Vertex, a British company. The end result of this request were watches known as the Dirty Dozen, characterised by their black dials, shatterproof crystals, and sub-second dial at 6 o'clock. I feel comfortable including the Timor Heritage Field on the list, as you can get them under $1,000, but it's very close, and if exchange rates rise, it will be slightly over. However, for the sake of safety, I will also add that you can get a period correct Dirty Dozen watch for under $1,000, though condition will vary wildly. So, there we have it. What I consider to be the 10 best watches with interesting stories to tell below $1,000. Well, kind of. There were some stories I uncovered that I'll call unsavoury and potentially insensitive that others might deem interesting. You can look up a common use for the Casio F91W if you really want to understand what I mean by that. Earlier on, I featured my Omega Seamaster in the video with a little story around why I wanted to buy it in the first place. Really, I just put that into the video as an excuse to open the floor to you about your own experiences. Do you have any watches with interesting stories connected to them? I'd love to hear it from you in the comments section below. If you've got any other cool stories relating to budget watches that I've overlooked, feel free to contribute those too. As ever, thank you for your time. If you've enjoyed what you've seen or found it informative, consider dropping the video a like and subscribing for more content like this in future.